Hi there, it's Simone. Today I am filming my first ink rotation review where I'm just focusing on the inks. And I am here with the cards of the inks, the swatches on coloring cards, and my ink journal. And I would like to share my findings about each of these inks. This month I had originally started out with 8 pens inked with 8 different inks. Krishna got green right over here, Birmingham Pen Company cerulean right there. Then this I wasn't sure about the base, was a mix made by my friend Patty, and we figured out that it is not what is written on the card. It is Diamine Amazing Amethyst with Wearingeul Heart, mixed in a ratio of 10:1. Then this one is Pilot Iroshizuku Momiji, Van Diemen's Honeybee Eater Chin, Sailor Shikiori Yuki Akari, Wearingeul Infinite Cube, and Wearingeul Lost. These three, the green and the cerulean and the Yuki Akari, were taken over from the previous month. And so let's start in the order that I have laid them out right here. I will keep the cards here so you can see what it looks on different papers. The ink journal that I am using is an old Hobonichi. I think it's from 2021. It's the Avec, and I just used the pages for my ink journal. It is perfectly usable 52 GSM Tomoe River paper, and so I decided I would use that little planner for that. So I've been changing the way that I am using my ink journal. If you've watched previous iterations of it, it looked more, let me check if I have a filled out one, like this. But I noticed that it didn't serve me anymore. I would dread doing this, even though I'm super interested in these explorations. And so I changed them up, and they're super fun for me now. I can get this whole thing done in about half an hour or so. Usually I do it at night when I'm cooking, and at the same time working on this, letting it dry, cooking some more, coming back. So I have an ink blob that I use an acrylic stamping block for. This one, actually. I just drop a drop on here, turn it around. This one is circular, some are not. I write the title of the ink or the name of the ink, where I got it from, not consistently, but this is information that would be cool if it was there. I make an ink chromatography, I make a water test, and I layer the ink in 3 layers. So 1, 2, 3. And I let these dry in between. And then I have seen this being done on Brenda from the Dormouse's Desk channel, but she uses different paper, and it is kind of like a watercolor chromatography like this, but it, for some reason, it doesn't seem to work on Tomoe River paper. Again, what learned, I'm still doing it, but it might just end up moving all of this over here and then not having this on there in the future. And then I use different pens, dip pens, to write some writing samples down here. It is important for me that it's dip pens because I can rinse those very easily. Previously, I used empty fountain pens and dip them, but then I would still have to rinse them very thoroughly, whereas those I can really easily clean, and that has helped very much in the way that this is more doable for me. And it is a lot of fun to see how the different nibs interact. I have since acquired the Hokuro dip pens from Sailor, which have upped this game even more. The Krishna Gut Green seems to be rather dry, at least in the pen that I had used. And so I'm really excited that I was able to explore it a bit more, because it does look amazing with other dip pens. It flowed well from the Iro Utsushi. With the Kakimori brass dip pen, it had some amazing shading, as well as with a broader glass dip pen. The chromatography shows that it has yellow undertones, because that's this green requires. There's some turquoise in here. There's yellow up here. It does not have any sheen, but it has some beautiful shading. And with the water test, it seems like if you want to save some of these writings, you would be very unlucky. There's nothing really left. But yeah, so it did not work very well on anything but the 52 GSM paper for me in that pen. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't work better in a wetter pen, for sure. The Birmingham Penco Cerulean is, at least that's how it felt to me, quite wet. It has some lovely, now we're starting to get with the colors. There is gray. It moves through some purples and then into the cyan blue up here. It does have a tiny, like only when you put down a whole lot of ink does it have a red halo sheen around the edges where it dries. And what I found very interesting in this here is that it looked like one of those granulating watercolors when it was very wet, which I found quite interesting. This ink is really lovely to use. It writes well with all of the dip pens that I have used, and it also wrote really well in the pen that I put it in. It wrote on all the papers. There was no issue. So I guess I found a really good combination. But this is, it's subdued and not as bright as other cerulean colors. So that's what I liked about this very, very much. And I still like it. I still have quite a bit of ink in this pen. So I'm not going to keep on inking it, but it was interesting. And very enjoyable to use. Every time, it never, ever disappointed. This was an interesting experience. I looked for the color online. It was labeled as Wearingeul Cowardly Lion, but that just didn't seem right because that is more of a brown. This is clearly purple. Patty thought at first that it was Twisby Royal Purple, but then we found that there is some green sheen around the edges here and here. And that, then she remembered that it must be Amazing Amethyst. I think this is also when I already had the Sailor Hokuro pens. So the interesting thing about this ink is it is a mix of 10 drops of the, not Twisby Royal Purple, Diamine Amethyst, and 1 drop of the Wearingeul Hard Shimmer Supplement. And so you can, it seems like throughout the time that I've used this, there was a lot of shimmer on here, but it seemed to have rubbed off completely. And I noticed previously that there was a lot of shimmer around here. I really enjoyed this ink. It was such a nice shader, and even though I often say that I don't enjoy sheening inks. This sheening was really nice because it made the writing even more interesting. As you can see, with the Fude nib, it gets a really lovely, very different, like it splits up into different shades of purple. There's some more blue hues, some more pink hues, what you see in the chromatography right here. There's bright pink, there's bright turquoise, and there's this a bit darker blue in the, I would say it's blue, but it's really hard to figure out. And this is an ink that I would love to purchase because it's just such a pretty, reliable purple. Yeah. So the water test, again, probably not very successful. Let me check back with the cerulean. Also, there is some hints of gray left, but not a lot. Then I have Momiji. This ink surprised me very much by how much I actually liked it. It is very bold. When you look at it right here, it has a gold sheen, especially when you layer it. It has gold sheen in all layers, but it has a very, very overpowering gold sheen even in the second and the third layer. There is not a lot of color separation right here. It is a pink with slight orange hues up here. And that's exactly what we see on the paper. I would probably be very flashed if I had it in a bigger nib than a fine nib. But what an amazing wet ink. What an amazing, interesting ink. And especially in the fine, the gold sheen is not overpowering. You can see super consistent writing experience. Awesome. And what I was very intrigued by was the fact that there is still legible ink left on the water test. So this is it. I have been very, very surprised by the Pilot Iroshizuku inks, and I've been thinking of adding bottles of inks of those Pilot Iroshizuku inks that I really enjoy using to my stash, because I feel like I would greatly benefit from having these inks in my stash. Coming from the person who says she's never going to buy ink bottles. But, you know, knowing that an ink will write in most pens makes the writing experience and also the, you know, the anticipation of using an ink so much better, which this was a big fail on my part. I didn't even have enough ink left to write over here. Unfortunately, I love this ink. And so I'm really glad that I'm doing these ink explorations, because this was a catastrophe in the pen that I put it in. I will talk about that in my review. Then I was trying to use it in a pen with a broad nib. That pen would not write at all. So I stressed out because I thought maybe the nib is not okay. It was a nib that I purchased and put into a pen for the first time. I rinsed it. I wanted to use this ink in it because I wanted to see how different it would feel in a broad nib, if maybe the experience was different. But I wasn't even able to do that because there was not enough ink left. Because on this swatch card, the Van Diemen's Honeybee Eater Chin is very bright yellow, orange leaning. But on my writing in my pen, it wasn't. And that was super disappointing. Now, I learned that I contaminated that filling. And so it was able to redeem itself a bit. because it definitely is in the medium nib. It is legible. The fine is really hard, as you can clearly see. Interesting is the chromatography. It is a yellow. I don't even see orange in this at all. So even though it appears to be orange leaning and there is some orangey shading bits around the third layer, it must be just a yellow. The ink is not very water resistant at all. Nothing is left on the page to be seen. So I guess this was the biggest fail for me this month. Then I have Sailor Shikiori Yuki Akari. I had this in my pen when I filmed the Currently Inked, and then it was so empty that I wasn't even able to do this. And I so extremely enjoyed the writing experience with this ink that I decided to purchase the ink bottle. When it got in, I did this ink exploration, and I had this ink in another pen previously, and it was a really bad writing experience. It wasn't flowing well. It felt very light. So what I learned by doing this ink exploration right here is that, yes, this ink is wet, but it also needs a pen that is wet enough to put enough ink on this page so that it's legible. If you look at the fine nib I made so many writing mistakes with this. I put Sailor Shikiori F. Here I put Sailor Pilot Iro Utsushi. The Sailor Hokuro fine. It is legible, but you have to really look. It does shade really nicely, starting from the medium nib. The Fude nib, if you compare this to for instance, the purple, this is more interesting than this in the Fude nib, for sure. So this is definitely a nice shading ink. It feels very watery, but I know that I have at least one pen where I will enjoy the writing experience, and I do love this color, so I can't wait to use it again. Interestingly enough, there is a lot of color still on the page after the water test. Another thing that I realized while I was doing these is that I seem to have picked very, boring is the wrong word, single dye inks. So the Yuki Akari is just one. The Honeybee Eater Chin is one. The Momiji has tiny hints of orange, but it's also very single dye, or I always want to say pigment, but I think all of those are dye inks. One single color. Then we are at Wearingeul Infinite Cube. This is what the swatch card looked like. There is a tiny bit hint of green up here, green sheen, in very heavy applications right here. You can see it. And since the book is so thick, the ink started to drip over here. I couldn't find my chromatography anymore, and now I have two, but it's exactly the same. So that means that the way that I'm conducting my chromatographies bring consistent results. Same with the water test. I dip it in, I put a strip of ink with the pen that I have inked, not with the Kakimori brass nib, because I've noticed that I'm putting too much ink on the chromatography strip. So I'm putting a line with the nib that with the pen that I have inked, and then I dip it into the water for 1 minute, just below the line. And when the minute is over, I pull it out and I hang it up to dry. So you can see same results. There is some olivey brown, dark ochres at the bottom. It moves through a violet, magenta-y to a very bright pink, salmon pink, which I didn't expect from this color. I really enjoy the look of the color. Again, there's not a lot of color left on the page when the water is on. It does not sheen in single applications, so you have to have a very wet writer to experience those in the writing session. As you can see, the first time it appears is with the Kakimori brass nib, when it lays down a lot of ink in the beginning. What I've noticed is that I have, same with when I'm writing with the pen, there's a lot of ink coming out in the beginning, but then it starts to get lighter very fast, even with the Kakimori brass nib. So I haven't really figured out why this happens, but it might be a drier ink, not 100% sure. So then we get to this very last color, which is the Wearingeul Hermann Hesse Demian Lost. And this ink is extremely interesting in the swatch right here, in the chromatography, and also in the layers. But when I'm using it in a pen, I actually find it very boring. Or you can also see with the writing samples, it's a light bluish gray, grayish blue. What I find very interesting is how when you put it down in bulk, there is this yellow shading, yellow coming through. There is dark blue shading around the edges right here, but it doesn't translate to the writing for sure. So we can see in the chromatography gray, purple, yellow, and turquoise, which is interesting to see in a blue ink. And I find that that's what makes this color so interesting to explore. I did not really enjoy it when I was writing with it. However, you can see there is color left from the water test. Still questionable if you can actually see anything after that. But that is what all of this looks like. I feel like I picked some really great colors. I am very, very, very happy with these. And these three are probably my favorite colors of this month. Or the most surprising colors of this month. This was more exciting in the pen than it actually was in the exploration. This one is also, maybe I'll put these 4, and then these are the not so best winners. So the most exciting inks in exploring and putting them on here were those. And also I also consider the writing experience with the pen. And then these are rather, boring is not the right word, but there was just something with these inks that made them not as exciting as these. And it is very obvious to me when I'm sorting them like that, that the ones that I'm not so excited about are the ones that are lighter inks. And these are very dark, very legible inks. So I guess what I'm learning from this month is that I seem to gravitate towards the darker inks. Let me know how that works for you. Are you more leaning towards the light shades? Are you enjoying those more? Or are you a dark ink user as me? I hope this was a video that I should continue adding to my lineup. Please let me know in the description box, in the comments down below. This ink is super red. You know what else is red? The subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, do it right now. And I hope to see you soon. Until then, bye.